welcome everybody. We are super excited to have you here with us today on a Tuesday afternoon. Where here in Connecticut, we're expecting some snow. I don't know what all of you are expecting, but we're excited to be here together today to be talking about this really important topic of how to build and refine specialized services for internationally trained professionals. So my name is Kristin Hempel, and I'm the Region 1 coordinator or rep for COABE. I'm also a director of a regional program in Northeastern Connecticut, and I'm on the board of the Connecticut Association and I lead the professional development work there. So this really sits very nicely for me. If you paid attention to the recording, there are a lot of really important things that I think COABE is doing right now that tie into what we're going to be talking about. And I just want to highlight a few of those for you. One is COABE really believes very strongly in supporting our learners' growth and success. And that's what this is about. That's what we're going to be talking about today. Some of the ways that COABE does this includes that free membership for your learners. So learners in any of our programs can get access to resources, and I encourage you to think about that and get them registered. We have a conference coming up, again, that is free for our learners to attend. So I hope that you're able to do that, whether they come virtually. You can do whole classrooms, you could do programs, or you're bringing them in person. But there's also been a consistent effort to bring certification options to the field. So whether it's the collaboration with NCCER or Google or IBM Skills Build, these are all important pieces that COABE has been advocating for on a national stage. Speaking of advocacy, this is definitely a season for that, and I hope that those of you who have not already joined our Educate and Elevate or our alumni study through your programs, do consider doing that to help us continue to advance the importance of the work that we're doing with the ITPs, as well as all of our learners throughout our country. And then I wanted to shine a spotlight on the SOS funds. So I think many of you may have received an email today about our COABE Foundation, the Educate and Elevate Foundation that has started, and there is an opportunity in there for people and for programs and learners to apply for SOS funds. And I encourage you to look into the foundation, see the amazing work that's being done, and make sure that your learners know that that's accessible to them. So transitioning from that, I did want to say I'm particularly excited to be here today because right now I feel particularly impassioned about the importance of doing all that we can for our new arrivals to ensure that they have a stable transition to our communities so that they know that we value them and that we appreciate the skills that they have and are actively helping to connect them with the roles that they can play in our communities and helping our communities and our states and our nation grow in so many ways. Today, I actually was coming from an international or a cultural potluck, and I got to sit down and talk with many of our learners. And I get goosebumps when I talk about this, and I just want to make sure that we're giving back to them as much as they're giving to us. The stories are powerful. The impact of what they're bringing is really invaluable. So I'm excited that we have such a great range of panelists here to talk to us about innovative work that's being done. I know for me and my program, we're consistently evaluating and adjusting and adapting and seeking out new tools, new partnerships in order to strengthen the services that we provide. And I think forums like this, where we can hear some success stories.
Hi, are you using this?
Yes, we need this room. Is that okay?
Okay, where we can hear the success stories. Don't worry about it. It happens to all of us. Where we can hear the success stories that are happening in different pockets around our country, as well as hopefully have the opportunity to talk with each other about how are we going to take those success stories and implement them back in our programs, in our states, in our regions. So we are trying something a little bit different today. This is a meeting and not a webinar, which does mean you should make sure you are mic'd, that your microphone is off and that you are muted, because you have a lot more access right now. But part of that is because we really do want to have that opportunity at the end to have a conversation and potentially breakout rooms for those of you who may be able to stay longer and want to roll up your sleeves and play around with some of the ideas that were shared by the panelists. So keep that in mind. For those of you, and And please have patience with us as we try this new format, because we are playing it a little bit loose here in terms of how many breakout rooms and all of that. We want to make sure that what we're doing is what you need and is valuable to you. So our intention is to do that adjustment in the moment. That said, I am going to transition this in a minute, but if you have not yet put your name, your state, and your role into the chat box, we'd really appreciate it if you did that so we could see the array of people who are here. Thank you for being here, and I'm going to go ahead and let's see. I guess the next slide is just introducing our presenters. I'll let the other presenters introduce themselves. As you know, I'm Kristin Hempel, and thrilled to be here with all of you today.
Hi, and I'm really thrilled to be here as well. My name is Debra West. I'm here on behalf of World Education Services, which is a nonprofit social enterprise that supports the educational and the economic and the social inclusion of refugees, immigrants, and international students in the U.S. Really excited to be here. And I guess for further introductions, I'll pass it over to the next on the slide, which is Allie.
Hi, everybody. It's so good to see everybody here and everybody just interested in learning more about how to support our internationally trained professionals. I'm here with Spring Institute for Intercultural Learning. We're a community-based nonprofit in the Denver metro area. And I'm our senior program manager of adult education and career pathways. And so our program does a lot of work supporting internationally trained healthcare and education professionals. And so I'll be giving a little bit of insight into how our program is structured and the types of services that we provide. And hopefully you'll be able to take some tools and resources back to your own programs. And I'll pass it over to Tad.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm thrilled to be here. I am Director of Partnership Development at Engine. So at Engine, we are working to create bridges between ESL and workforce development programs. And we have a lot of specialized content for internationally trained professionals, as well as a majority of our staff are internationally trained professionals. So it's an area that I've done a lot of work, both at Engine and previously at Upwardly Global. So looking forward to this conversation.
So I think I'm going to jump in here. And again, I just want to really say thank you to everybody. Thank you to COABE for allowing us the opportunity to convene folks this afternoon as well. And I think, as was said by Kristin and certainly by the other panelists here today, I just want to echo that I'm also excited to really be part of this conversation on looking at and strengthening education and workforce pathways for the internationally trained professionals that may be coming through our programs. I also agree that I think this is a really critical issue. And I know that with this incredible group of participants from a broad range of geographies across the nation, it's really exciting to be able to bring deep expertise and commitments to advancing this work. So on the slide right here, basically just to go over our agenda or what we seek to be able to accomplish as our learning objectives. We really want to explore 4 areas around shaping ITP-focused programming and services. So starting at the top, we want to be able to discuss the data related to newcomers with high levels of international education, as well as unpack some of the common individual and structural barriers to their economic inclusion and their career advancement. We then want to talk about innovative service models and how programs are supporting ITPs in gaining access to employment and training that is more aligned to their skills and experience. We also want to be able to cover some of the sustainable funding and partnerships and talk about the role of collaboration and investment in scaling internationally trained professional focused initiatives. And then enhancing career pathways, where we can really just provide some insight into some practical strategies for improving outcomes in program design as well as implementation. So we have a really great lineup of discussions. I certainly want to also encourage all of you to engage, ask questions, share your insights. But let's get started. I guess if we can go to the next slide. So want to really just, hold true to that first learning objective, which is really just to frame the issue by diving a little bit deeper into some of the barriers as well as the data. So if we can go to the next slide. But before diving into sort of the meat of the solutions, I want to be able to just take a step back and get a better understanding of who's in the room. As I think you probably will all agree, ITPs bring valuable skills and credentials to the workforce and to education, but they often face barriers that prevent them from being able to gain access to relevant skills and training and programs and services. So at this time, many industries are facing talent shortages, presenting an opportunity to bridge the gap with internationally trained talent. Our focus on today is on solutions. And so a better way to be able to sort of understand where we're all at is hopefully through this quick poll. If folks don't mind potentially just dropping their responses into the chat, want to be able to get a better understanding of how focused your programs, your organizations are, how close you are to being able to work with this population. Are you working with them through a dedicated program at the moment? Are you doing some work and fostering some partnerships, but you're really looking to learn a little bit more? Or are you currently not doing a lot of active work, but you're really interested in being able to understand what some appropriate first steps might be? So this is great. We seem to have, folks that are taking a moment, the responses are coming in, and it looks as though there's a wide range. I want to thank everybody for participating in the survey. And it's always great to get a sense of the range of experience in the room, whether you're working extensively with this population or if you're just starting. Just as a reminder as well, this is actually a Zoom meeting. It's not a webinar. So if I can just remind and encourage folks to please mute yourself. We do want to be able to encourage conversation, but by all means, we also just want to make sure that everybody is able to gain accessibility and hearing. So for today's conversation, we really want to be able to provide an opportunity to deepen our collective understanding and identify some actionable strategies. So thanks again for providing in your responses. And I think we can jump to the next slide. So to help us ground our conversation, thought it would be helpful if we just looked at some data around internationally trained professionals that are currently being served through federally funded workforce, adult education programs. So between fiscal year 2001 and 2022, thought this would be helpful to poll. But according to federally funded adult education programs, estimated that around 900,000 participants nationwide were enrolled. And of those, close to 99,000 participants, which is roughly around 11%, hold non-US post-secondary or professional degrees. So the reason that I thought it would be helpful to bring this up is because, this really highlights that there's a significant number of ITPs that are, already accessing adult education programs. Yet we may know that there are many more that are in need of targeted support to transition into careers that align with their qualifications and experience. These numbers might raise questions as well. Are current programs designed to fully meet the needs of ITPs? Are there opportunities to expand or to tailor our services to better support this population? And how can we strengthen pathways from adult education into high quality employment? I think we can go to the next slide. So now that we've seen at least the data on ITPs and federally funded adult education programs, thought it would be helpful to just talk a little bit about one of the major challenges that many of these learners face, which is skill underutilization, and how it connects to adult education services and programming. In the context of adult education, skill underutilization really refers to individuals with advanced education, training, or professional experience from countries that are often unable to fully apply their skills in the US. And this leads really to two outcomes, one being unemployment or underemployment. And so when we think about the role that adult education can play, it can really play a critical role in addressing skill underutilization by looking at and providing bridge programs that can connect ITPs to credential recognition pathways and upskilling opportunities like those provided by the Welcome Back Initiative and the Welcome Back Centers across the nation. We can also look at integrated education and training models that align language learning with career preparation, career navigation and advising to help ITPs understand their options and take strategic next steps, as well as partnerships with employers and workforce programs to open doors to skill-appropriate employment all of which our speakers are going to provide some examples of today. I think we can go to the next slide. So now that you've received a little bit of a frame as to the issue of skill underutilization, and specifically in the context of adult education, let's just take a look at the bigger picture of how widespread this challenge is at a national level, and not just under the lens of federally funded programs. So nationally, it's estimated that over 2 million college-educated immigrants and refugees are employed or unemployed. And of those, roughly about 60% hold credentials that were gained outside of the US. This highlights really a systemic barrier to the opportunity of leveraging their education and their experience in the US. And for adult education programs, this data really underscores the urgency of providing targeted support for ITPs. Many of the individuals reflected in these numbers, they could benefit from career pathway programs, credential evaluation services, and partnerships that really connect them to skill-appropriate employment opportunities. Next slide. So understanding and sort of building on the skill underutilization factor, the national data, the data around the numbers that are in federally funded programs. Now let's break down some of the specific barriers that may impact internationally trained students and learners. These barriers exist both at the structural and individual levels, and they may directly impact the way adult education programs best serve this population. First, if we looked at the structural barriers, there are broader systemic challenges that shape the economic opportunities available to immigrants and refugees. And many of these issues might intersect with the way that adult education systems and workforce systems are designed. Some of those structural barriers could be misalignment in training programs, where often they're not necessarily customized to meet the unique needs of ITPs. There's also systemic inequities, which we recognize could be that there sometimes is bias in terms of where or who is able to access training. There might be employer unfamiliarity. Many may not understand what an international credential is, and instead they might be directing individuals to redo their education to get a high school equivalency as their first necessary step. And then certainly if we're talking about regulated occupations, oftentimes restrictive licensing plays a part because it's very complex to be able to understand how to take and build upon the experience and specifically the credentials that one might be bringing from overseas. On an individual level, ITPs often face barriers that may make it difficult to transition into skill-appropriate employment, but also into appropriate training programs. These can include language proficiency gaps. For many ITPs, language skills, not technical ability, tend to be sometimes a primary barrier. And so adult education programs can address this by integrating, maybe it's workforce English, workplace English, sector-specific language training, or contextualized learning into workforce prep programs. Other individual barriers may be a lack of US experience, for which many ITPs have their experience extensively abroad, and they may struggle to translate that into US job opportunities. So programs that offer internships and apprenticeships that can provide necessary exposure to this population for US workforce expectations. The other one that I think is important to highlight is limited professional networks. I think if we all thought about the ways in which we maybe found our first job, or if we look at maybe how we found our current job, often it's from maybe understanding who's in our professional network that we know. It sometimes is crucial for job placement as well, yet many ITPs, they lack access to professional circles in their field. Adult education providers, we can help by being able to create mentorship programs or connecting learners to industry professions and incorporating networking strategies into any career readiness training programs. And then I think the last one that I wanted to highlight is just the inadequate credential recognition. For many ITPs, they often struggle to have their degrees or their certifications gained overseas recognized. And the value of adult education programs is that you can play a role in guiding learners through the evaluation process and helping them to understand and identify what alternative pathways may best align to their skills and their educational backgrounds. As an adult educator, this group is really positioned to be able to address these barriers and maybe others that you're seeing amongst the learners that are coming into your programs. Because both through the programs that you offer and the partnerships that you build, there's an opportunity that, through that, there can be the development and the opening of doors to high quality pathways for ITPs. I think we can go to the next slide. Thought this would just be helpful, and obviously, we're going to drill down a little bit more in this with some of the other speakers that are coming up. But when we talk about facilitating access for ITPs to better support them, there's sort of 4 areas that surface. English proficiency, as we talked about, workforce aligned ESL programs, contextualized learning, conversation circles, intensive language programming, which I know that we'll hear a lot about from Tad as well as from Allie. U.S. experience, recognizing the opportunity to, facilitate access for this population through internships and apprenticeships and industry recognized certifications, and really leaning in on some of the college courses that provide access to relevant workforce training. Social capital, again, building those networking events, those mentorship programs, and then lastly, the credential recognition piece. And by embedding these supports into adult education programs, we really can try to create stronger pathways for ITPs, ones that don't just focus on immediate language and training, but also address the long-term goals of full economic inclusion. And in the next section, I think we're really going to explore some of the real-world models and strategies that are successfully implementing these approaches. But to bring this to life, let's look at some of the programs that are actively supporting ITPs across the country. This is a resource that we certainly want to make sure that all of you have access to, and it's an interactive national program map, which is a great tool to identify some initiatives near you, programs near you. It highlights efforts, around programs that are really leveraging their expertise in credential recognition, that are providing U.S. Workforce experience, and that are really tailoring their programs so that they're career aligned. Our next speakers from the Spring Institute and from Engine are also going to share some insights on innovative models, partnerships, and best practices that are making an impact in the field. And I think with that, I'm going to turn it over to our next speaker, Allie.
Thank you for framing the context and kind of where things are at, Debra. I think it's really clear from the data that international professionals do bring a lot of value to our country, and yet they are very underutilized as a potential for our workforce. So I want to talk about Spring Institute and the work that we do with internationally trained professionals. At Spring Institute, we're guided by the mission to build a thriving intercultural community through learning, language access, and advocacy. And so all of our programs and services are centered around supporting the newcomer community in a variety of ways. But for the sake of this presentation, I'm just focusing on our adult education and career pathways program. So in our adult education and career pathways program, we kind of have 4 key service categories in which we operate. So we have our ESL classes for adult newcomers. Those are your standard English language acquisition classes for adults. We provide a variety of topics and contextualizations for those classes, but they're truly just focused on English language acquisition. And then on our career pathways side of the program, it can be broken down into like 3 main buckets of services. We have our Colorado Welcome Back program, which is a part of the national initiative, the Welcome Back Initiative, which is comprised of, I believe, 12 centers now across the nation that work with internationally trained healthcare professionals in helping them navigate recredentialing in the US. And so Colorado, we were one of those centers that was established back in 2010, and we are still doing that work today. And then we have another service called Colorado Works for international physicians. I'm going to be highlighting this and the New American Pathway for Teachers in the coming slides. So I'm not going to say too much about those. But throughout our program, we integrate these key components to ensure that international professionals are really getting a holistic service offering. So we focus on that English language acquisition component. We do that through traditional classes, but we also provide access to self-paced online tools. For example, we use NGen quite a bit across our ITP programming. And I will be talking about that a bit more as well. We also focus on recredentialing navigation. And so recredentialing navigation, it varies a lot person to person based on what their professional background was, where they're coming from, what their status might be. And so it takes a lot of tedious and detailed knowledge to really address the individual's needs and the pathway for them to regain their career in the US. We also have a financial assistance component where we provide access to like paying for trainings, credential evaluations, childcare, transportation. So it's inclusive of those wraparound services as well as cost related to the credentialing pathway. And then we provide human-centered coaching. So we've drifted away from that more of a career advisor or mentorship and have started to focus more on a career coaching model, which has a slightly different type of mindset and perspective to assist international professionals. And then lastly, we focus on skill development as well. So as I mentioned, Spring Institute has been serving ITPs since 2010 through our Colorado Welcome Back program. And since then, it's looked different and it's gone through its changes. But since our founding, we've served over 1,000 ITPs, focusing mainly in the healthcare and education professions. And we've seen an average employment rate of 25% of our ITPs getting employed in their industry sector. In 2019, we started to move more into the policy advocacy space. And the reason I bring this up is because it's an often forgotten piece of supporting internationally trained professionals. We can create the programs, but we also need to garner the support of our state and local and federal governments to really push access for ITPs in working in their original professions. And so Spring Institute, we provided recommendations around healthcare professionals during the pandemic. We've also supported international medical graduate licensure recommendations, which I'll talk about when I discuss the COIP program. And then we've also participated on the Global Talent Task Force in 2023, which was a part of our Office of New Americans. And more of our states are creating these Offices of New Americans. And so I highly recommend looking into if your state has an Office of New Americans, what they are doing, and especially what are they doing to support internationally trained professionals. And so since our establishment in 2010, we've experienced some shifts over time. So we've had a shift in providing more financial assistance. These pathways for ITPs tend to be very cost intensive. For example, the board exam for an international medical graduate costs nearly $2,000, and they have to take 2 of them. That's expensive for anybody. And so if it's possible to provide that financial assistance piece, it's really key. Again, I've kind of mentioned we moved towards a career coaching perspective, which I will talk a bit about in a couple more slides. And then we've moved from just a one-on-one support model to a cohort-based model. So really focusing on providing peer support and networking across industries. And then we've also shifted to diversify our funding. So instead of relying on a singular grant that might be coming from the government, we've started to identify other funding sources through foundations, through recurring donors, and as well as a diverse range of government-funded grants as well. So I wanted to focus down on 3 models of success that we've had. So COIP, the New American Pathway, and Colorado Welcome Back for nurses. I would just want to highlight a few key pieces of each program for you all to kind of take just some little nuggets of information. So Colorado Works for International Physicians, or COIP, is a partnership between Denver Health and Spring Institute. And this program was actually established by law. This was part of the policy advocacy that Spring Institute was conducting in 2019 through 2022. And so we were able to pass legislation to create a program for international medical graduates. And so this program is comprised of 2 pieces, the Clinical Readiness Program through Denver Health and the IMG Assistance Program through Spring Institute. And so this is really founded on an industry partnership where Denver Health is providing a lot of that hands-on experience. And then Spring Institute is providing more of that expertise in navigating the licensure process. Next is the New American Pathway. This one is focused on supporting education professionals. And again, we're partnering with another organization, but this is an organization similar to Spring Institute. So they're the Public Education and Business Coalition, and they provide supportive services to teachers across the state of Colorado. And so we came together and created a bridge to teacher residency with PEBC. And so what that looks like is it's a cohort-based program where a group of 15 educators receive monthly language instruction through Spring Institute, as well as education orientation to the U.S. education system through PEBC. They're able to participate in classroom labs with K-12 educators and experience what it actually looks like to be in a US-based classroom. And so this program, again, it's focused on an industry partnership, slightly different aspect to that. But the emphasis is really on building the language required for teacher residency and understanding the US education culture. And then lastly is our Colorado Welcome Back program for nurses. And so this is really our kind of standard traditional type of model where we support internationally trained nurses in navigating the recredentialing process. There's no clear industry partner in this model, but we're focusing on providing resource guidance, providing workshops where we invite industry speakers to present on specifics related to nursing in the US. And then we also provide a lot of financial assistance with this one, as well as language access. And so through the New American Pathway and CWB for Nursing, we are both using the NGen platform, which provides a lot of that self-paced, contextualized English upskilling for these professionals. And we're using that platform because it does provide a lot of flexibility for busy adult learners who don't have a lot of time to spend in a classroom, especially if they're working full-time in maybe an entry-level type position, as well as working on studying for their exams, for the boards, and things like that. So we're finding that rather than providing a strict ESL type of traditional class, using an upskilling platform like NGen has been really, really key for learners to increase their English proficiency. Before I move on, I just want to check, am I still good on time? Okay, great. So I wanted to break this down by 3 different angles of approach. And so we could look at supporting ITPs by supporting them as the clients, or supporting our coaches, our staff, who are actually supporting ITPs, or working with our collaborators, our different partners in this work. So when we're focused on the clients, we're seeing that it is key for them to have that peer-to-peer interaction. When we started our Colorado Welcome Back program, we mainly focused on individualized one-on-one type of support. And we often heard from folks that they felt siloed, that they didn't have a connection to any other professionals going through this process. And so that's when we really made that shift to a cohort-based model. And since then, we've seen not only the ITPs gain tools and resources and knowledge from each other, but actually take on leadership responsibilities and connect each other to other industry professionals nationwide. So not even just in Colorado, but they're starting to expand their networks across the states. We've also been able to provide some diverse skilling opportunities for folks. So we've identified specific platforms that do a much better job than us in providing that instruction to individuals. And so I'm talking about preparation for board exams that are required. So for example, right now we're exploring a partnership with Kaplan. They have online self-paced platforms for individuals to prepare for the U.S. medical board exams and the international the INBDE, that's the dental board exam. So they have these platforms for individuals to actually prepare for those test pieces that we don't have the expertise in. They've already done the heavy lifting. And so we're continually creating opportunities for individuals to improve their skilling. I've already talked about the financial assistance piece. Really what's key with that is having a lot of flexibility in it, being able to not only pay for pathway related costs like paying for exams and background checks, but also being able to support with the wraparound cost as well, like childcare or transportation or purchasing the required technology. And then we also offer a very flexible format. So we do both in person as well as virtual online. And this allows our busy professionals to access our services regardless of their physical location. The next component of this is supporting our career coaches. And we do this through providing different types of professional development pieces. I will be sharing some resources for you all that's a little more focused on professional development for your staff who are doing these direct service components. We're also embodying a coaching mindset. And so this is really considering the person as fully creative, whole, and capable of pursuing the pathway that they are on. They already have a lot of the skills, the abilities to succeed. They're just missing some of those steps, those key pieces of what is next. And so we are here just to provide that support and not have a kind of like a power dynamic where we're over the individuals. It's very much a side-by-side type of collaborative relationship. And then delivering quality and structured services to meet the individual's needs. And then lastly is the collaborator piece, where we are focusing on integrating industry professionals through various types of formats and structures. We have some formal partnerships, like I talked about with Denver Health, where they are providing a whole piece of programming as well as Spring Institute. But we also work with industry professionals as referral providers and guest speakers in our workshops that we provide to ITPs. And then lastly is partnering with policy advocates. Spring Institute, we're fortunate enough to have a policy advocate team within our organization, but I understand not every organization has access to that. So I definitely encourage you all to look for different advocacy organizations in your local area who are passionate about supporting newcomers, especially professionally trained newcomers, and starting to have conversations with them about, have you considered the difficulties and the challenges that exist for internationally trained professionals to regain their careers here? Debra provided a lot of data. And you have the stories. And so combined, you can really be an advocate and connecting to those policy partners, the people who can really make systemic changes. So here are a few resources. We'll be sharing these out later, but I have some participant resources through Upwardly Global and WES. Both organizations have some very, very great credentialing guides. Just note that each state tends to be a little different. So definitely use these as a starting point and a reference, but also know you'll have to do a little bit more digging to know exactly what your state requires for internationally trained professionals. WES Guides also provides courses for ITPs. They're like virtual workshops that have a very, very specific focus and specific topics for different industry professionals. And then the professional development resources that I'm providing includes the Rework America Alliance skilling resources. These are more for career coaches and employers working with ITPs. And then some different reports and a webinar series. So I'm going to pass it over to Tad.
This, please.
All right. Thank you, Allie, and thank you, Debra, for sharing your insights. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about Engine and how it relates to supporting internationally trained professionals. We can go to the next slide. This image really helps to illustrate what Engine is. We want to be a bridge from general English language learning over to workforce development programs, apprenticeships, IETs, and employment opportunities. So for working with internationally trained professionals, Engine can provide some of that industry-specific English language learning, contextualized ESL, so that they can succeed in relicensing exams, so that they can be successful in interview experiences and really get to put those skills to use. Next slide. At Engine, we think of English as a workforce skill. Within all of these different professions that do require training, when someone is truly bilingual or multilingual, they bring so many skills to the workforce. They can better communicate with patients, with customers. They can access additional training opportunities in their workplace. And for ITPs, sometimes it is not a straight line. So when they can connect with training in their workplace, when they can connect with apprenticeship opportunities, they're able to increase those skills and get into jobs with family-sustaining wages. I do want to share that, as has been mentioned multiple times, a lot of these ITP innovations happen on a state-by-state basis. It's very difficult for dentists to become recredentialed, but I know the state of Massachusetts has established a dental apprenticeship program. So that's something to look into. Next slide. And we can go through, click through these. Why use technology in these types of situations? Well, as Allie mentioned, ITPs are often working while they are working towards their goals. So technology can assist in reaching more learners, removing barriers, especially individualizing instruction for the industry and the career goals of a specific individual. In terms of ITPs, we have some courses like English for NCLEX, the nursing exam, English for STEM teachers, English for internationally trained engineers. So very specialized, contextualized, self-paced courses that folks can really prove and expand their vocational ESL. And through competency-based models, they can often move more quickly through these training programs. I think there's one more bullet. And of course, integrating digital skills. 93% of all jobs require digital skills. So including digital skills development within your adult education programs is so important. Next slide. I want to talk about a couple of examples, and these are from across the country. Emily Griffith Technical College in the Denver metro area. They have amazing resources to support learners making a vocational transition. That's actually what they call this program. So when learners get to a certain proficiency level, they want to help them to prepare for success in their career and technical education offering, ranging from nursing and medical assistant, construction apprenticeship, cosmetology, culinary, and more. So they use Engine to determine if the learner is ready for that CTE offering, but also to set them up for success, because the more that they have that vocational and industry-specific English, the better prepared they are. At Austin Community College, they have really robust programs for internationally trained professionals. They use Engine for a couple purposes. For TOEFL preparation, because TOEFL can often be required as an English language assessment within the relicensing process. Also, they work with, I believe, over 1,000 ITPs on an annual basis from very different career pathways. So it's a non-homogeneous group. So they want to make sure that those learners are able to learn the job skills and workplace readiness skills and resume development that are relevant across professions. But they also want them to get that industry-specific English so that they can be successful in their own career pursuits, whether they're a teacher, a nurse, an engineer, etc. Looking the other side of the country, up in Maine, Lewiston Adult Education, they're really innovating in the pre-apprenticeship and apprenticeship space. So partnering closely with health systems, and I see a lot of this in Maine, that their healthcare providers are really open to direct partnership with adult education providers for English upskilling and preparing them for apprenticeship opportunities. I know, for example, within the Maine health system, which I believe is the largest employer in Maine, they have workforce development programs, but the individual has to have a certain CASA score in order to be eligible for those training funds through the employer. And another of our large-scale programs at Miami-Dade College, which it has very robust internationally trained professional programs, but they use us primarily for transitions to IET, CTE offerings, and other academic pursuits. Go to the next slide. I'm not going to read everything on this page, but as you get the slides and the recording, please consider these challenges and needs that ITPs face. And this really comes from my background working at Upwardly Global and with partnership programs. Each individual has unique barriers. As Allie mentioned, there may be financial considerations to consider, both for how they support themselves, but also how they can afford their own relicensing pursuits. The three biggest predictors of success for internationally trained professionals are having strong English skills, not surprising, having earned a related credential in the US. So that's where adult education, IETs, and community colleges can play such a key role in essentially putting that stamp of approval and earning a related US credential that builds upon their experience in the US. And also, not surprising, social capital, the size of their network. Just like if any of us were job searching tomorrow, we would reach out to friends and alumni and former colleagues to try to connect with opportunities. With internationally trained professionals, confidence is very important. Often confidence has to be rebuilt. So that's why it is important to provide that peer support and that coaching. Because many times when an ITP comes to the US, some of the strategies that would have made them successful in their home country will not make them successful here. Whether it's, holding eye contact in an interview or really being proud and talking about your skills and accomplishments. There are cultural differences. So however you can help them to, tailor their resume to the jobs they're pursuing, evaluate degrees and diplomas where appropriate and with the appropriate provider, add professional development skills, internship opportunities, and again, making connections. I'm really a big fan for many ITPs of looking at what are the apprenticeship opportunities that allow them to earn and learn at the same time. And of course, at Engine, we support building hybrid, scalable, flexible models. So with the one thing I wanted to add with, I'm going to put the list of courses on the Engine platform in the chat. Please check it out just to see what are the contextualized pathways we have available that can help you to build ITP programs, IET programs, pre-apprenticeship, and the like. Next slide. Of course, I'm open to questions. And I want to go back to something that was mentioned earlier on, right at the start of the presentation. It's an important time to be advocates for your learners. So WIOA reauthorization is underway. Apprenticeship funding is being considered. So please talk to your representatives, your senators about the importance of adult education, WIOA, apprenticeship funding, all of the things that allow your learners to be able to fully contribute to their local economy and support their families. So again, put your comments in the chat, and this is for all of the panelists. We've covered a lot of ground over the past 56 minutes. You are able to unmute yourself if you would like to ask a question verbally. You don't have to put it in the chat. Or even if you want to share an insight, a learning from your own work with internationally trained professionals in your community, this is an open discussion, so please don't hesitate to unmute yourself. It's always hard to be the...
I'll speak up. My name's Becky Alkovich. I'm with Wayne County Schools Career Center in Wayne County, Ohio. And I'm not sure that this question is relevant based exactly on what's being discussed, but the reason I'm in this session is because I have several Haitian students who are looking at becoming nurses. And our program has kind of separate but connected parts. I teach general English for students who are learning English as a second language. And I have found that through collecting some data about the students' goals, there has been misinformation. I think just through kind of the lost in translation situation where these students felt that by writing down their goals of achieving nursing certification, that they were going to be getting nursing education from me, which is not what I do. And so I'm trying to figure out how to better communicate with students for whom English is enough of a struggle that they don't understand the details and the background knowledge that they don't currently have for a specific program. But it's good enough that they catch keywords. And so they hear things like, oh, our career center has a nursing program, and once your English is good enough, you might be eligible to take it, and then you could have financial aid and get your certification. So I guess I'm curious, like, for lower level English students who are coming in as ITPs, how do you communicate clearly with them to determine what their best course forward is? And if you don't offer it in kind of a straightforward way, how do you go about finding them the help they need?
I'd be happy to field this question. So Becky, right? Is that right? Yeah. So it's Spring
Yeah,
Institute.
sorry, I
We
turned my
actually,
mic back off. It's
oh,
fine.
no, you're fine. At Spring Institute, we just started working with refugee ITPs who have backgrounds in healthcare and education. And a part of this program is that we are required to serve individuals regardless of their English proficiency. Whereas our traditional career pathway services, we do require at least a high intermediate level of English proficiency or above. So this has been a shift for our program. What we have started to do is budget in the funds to pay for live interpretation, which is expensive. But when talking about those really specific details of somebody's goals, their previous experience, we're realizing it is key to have that communicated in an individual's native language, even if they're going through the process of English upskilling and maybe they're already at like a high beginning or an intermediate level of English. Having that information communicated in their native language is honestly essential. And so also our career coaches, two of our coaches are fluent in Spanish as well as English. And so that's also been really helpful too.
Thanks for those thoughts. I highly doubt we're going to be able to go the live interpreter route, but it is reinforcing the fact that I need to develop more of my language abilities too.
And I will say the like AI and Google Translate have actually gotten really good at translating. And so even if it's just as simple as like explaining to someone you don't have the English proficiency yet, keep working. Eventually you'll be eligible to participate in this program. Those free translation services are pretty decent.
While it may not be exactly relevant to true beginner level learners, I do want to encourage all adult educators to familiarize themselves with some of the Department of Labor and local workforce websites that will indicate high demand of professions and the related training programs, because that can help folks to understand and expect, the training that's required, the eventual salary, the skills that are beneficial. So there's a lot of resources all the way from, Own It online to things that Allie had mentioned. Their Global Talent Task Force report highlights a lot of in-demand professions in Colorado. And almost every state is going to have a list of probably every state is going to have a list of high demand professions in the region.
Yeah, I was just going to share one other piece, which I dropped it into the chat if it's helpful. But, sometimes during those first intake meetings or those first enrollment meetings for your programs, being able to ask upfront, recognizing sometimes that the language challenges may persist, but, being able to sort of talk with learners about their short term and somehow being able to indicate what that means goals are versus their long-term, and being able to help them to map it out so that they see exactly where things fit on that timeline could also be, you know, an option that's helpful. I know that the career pathways resources that Allie mentioned in her part of the presentation, we do have a tool that's on those guides that actually does provide a short-term and a long-term sort of career planning document. But certainly during that initial intake session, it could help as well to make sure that the person is being triaged to the right area so that they're getting their immediate needs, which may be that their immediate needs are their basic English language proficiency needs met before they're feeling as though they can progress onto a stage that might not be 100% relevant for where they're at.
I will say this might not be for the learners you were raising, but for ones with a little bit more English. One of the pieces that has been important for us is having a partnership with the local community-based health center, and they do have some bilingual staff there. And so some of the learners that we're working with, you know, their language skills aren't yet at a place where they can engage with some of the coursework, but they still really appreciate being able to be in a meaningful situation and to lend a hand. And so they've been able to do some short-term internships. So while we're emphasizing that word yet, you know, being able to get them a little bit of opportunities to keep feeling like they're engaging in some way has been, I think, important for the confidence piece, I think that Tad was raising.
And also kind of continuing on that point, when working with ITPs who maybe, for example, they're a credentialed nurse in their country, it's essential for them to also get that work-based experience here in the US before actually getting the full licensure of being an RN. And so we recommend to our folks to get a CNA license, which is that entry level type position that can then help them get that experience in the US. And in Colorado, the CNA exam, for example, can be facilitated in Spanish. And if you're not a native English speaker, you can request a time extension on the exam. And so that's also something you can look into in your state specifically. If there are any sort of like entry-level professions that align with your ITP's skill sets and pathway, and if your state allows any sort of exceptions or modifications to those certification pathways for more of those entry-level careers, they can be a little more accessible to folks who have a lower level English proficiency while still getting them into their original industry.
So that actually brings up a really good point. So in Ohio, it's an STNA program as opposed to CNA. It's essentially the same, from what I can tell, but I'm not in that field, so I can't guarantee I'm right about that. But what I've heard repeatedly, and please, if anybody else out there is from Ohio and knows differently, I would love to learn more about this. But what I've heard is that even someone with a fairly decent grasp on the English language, so say NRS 3-4, would still need approximately 2 to 3 years of experience in Ohio to pass this exam. Now, I will say from personal experience, there's at least one counterexample to that. She was only in the US for about 7 months before she passed the exam. Her kind of nursing program director that was helping her prepare had informed me pretty adamantly that there was no chance of her passing the exam and that I should tell her she needed to kind of put on the brakes. Having more ESOL experience, I didn't think that was the case. The student had been learning English in her home country. She was fairly culturally aware, given her background. And I didn't think it was going to be quite as much of an issue for her to get that background knowledge. She just needed to learn kind of a few more vocabulary terms really that were specific to the STNA exam. And she did manage to pass. But because of that experience, I was looking into the exams much more deeply, and it does seem like the exams are not exactly geared for people who speak normal English, to put it simply. So trying to be able to navigate, like, what English do you need to prepare for this exam? It didn't seem to really coincide with a placement in, so the majority of our local STNA programs, they'll allow you to work, I think it's approximately 4 months before you take the exam. And within that program, you're doing mostly small talk, like day to day. Hi, how are you? Let's get you in the shower. Let's get this cleaned up. Can we help you dress, help you cook? So it's more about self-care for the initial, like, entry level programs. And then transitioning from that to the more advanced, like, medical terminology seems to be where a lot of them are struggling, because the exam focuses on more technical terminology. So if anybody is aware of, like, how it works in Ohio, or if maybe the CNA exam is like this as well, and I just don't know because that's not what we have here, I would love to hear more about that.
So while not from Ohio, Rebecca, I do know that through our skilled immigrant integration program here at West, we do actually partner with communities and programs in Ohio. So I'd be happy to follow up with you afterwards and put you in touch with some of the folks that I know there, of which I'm certain that they are working on some healthcare related programming. So I think I can certainly make sure that I put you in touch so that you can have some information from folks on the ground that might be seeing similar situations that you're surfacing.
That would be wonderful. Thank you.
Anyone else? Questions, comments? Well, I do want to thank everyone for coming today and engaging in this discussion. It's very important to be building up these resources and services through adult education providers in your local community. So thank you for the work that you do. Any other final words from the presenters?
I just also want to echo the thanks, and I'm just going to drop into the chat here as well that certainly if there's any questions that folks have, feel free to connect and reach out. Appreciate the opportunity, and also just your support and your partnership in doing this work.
Absolutely. Thank you guys for hanging on for so long. And I know Susan and Jennifer, at one point, both of you had your mics off. So if you do want to follow up, don't hesitate to reach out to any of us. Definitely looking to answer questions or connect you to resources. So again, thank you. It was a pleasure seeing all of you today.
Thank you. Have a nice day.
Have a good one.